All right, good morning, everyone. Let's jump right into today's deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
We've got kind of a crazy mix of market trends and company news today, and even some, I don't know, like bigger picture stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're going to be talking about AI, getting super smart, like, and also the Panama Canal making a comeback after that huge drought.
Really?
So it's kind of all over the place.
Interesting. Well, I'm ready if you are.
All right. Okay, so let's start with the markets, I guess. Kind of a bit of a tug of war out there yesterday.
Yeah.
So the S&P 500 dipped just slightly, down 0.12%, closing at 6,001.35.
Okay.
But on the flip side, the Dow Jones decided to be a little bit more optimistic, finishing up 0.53%.
Interesting.
At 44,293.12.
Wow. So, like, what do you think is driving that? Like, why is the Dow doing better than the S&P?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it seems like maybe investors are just feeling a little bit cautious overall. You know, with all the uncertainty in the economy globally and everything that's going on with tech, maybe they're looking for just a little bit more stability, you know? Like those blue chip companies, those traditional companies, they're
the safe bet.
Yeah.
Like the old reliables.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But speaking of tech, the Nasdaq was definitely not feeling the love yesterday.
Oh, no.
It closed down 0.29% at 19,298.76.
Oof.
And it seems like that gloom is kind of spilling over into the crypto world, too.
Uh-oh.
Both Bitcoin and Ethereum took a bit of a hit. Bitcoin dropped 2.88% to close at $86,184. And Ethereum slid down 3.42%, ending at $3,260.63.
Like clockwork.
Yeah. Volatility city, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that just really shows how crypto is so sensitive to just the broader market, you know, especially with all the connections it has to tech. But you know what I find really interesting is like this kind of divergence that we're seeing, you know? Like we've got the Dow kind of pushing upwards while tech and crypto are retreating. Do you think that's a sign of like maybe a change in how investors are behaving?
Yeah. Almost like they're rotating out of like those high growth but kind of riskier assets, and then they're going more into like those steady eddy, those dividend paying companies like we were saying.
Right.
It's interesting. And then to add another layer to that, you know, small cap stocks, like as represented by the Russell 2000, they actually had a pretty good day.
Really?
Yeah, up almost 1%, closing at 2,435.
Okay. So it does seem like there is some appetite for risk out there.
Yeah, maybe.
Just maybe. They're looking for it in different places than they used to.
Right. It's like this really interesting dance between like cautious optimism, you know, and then also selective risk taking. It's kind of hard to put your finger on exactly what's driving it.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed bag out there.
Okay, but let's switch gears for a second and talk about something that's less about Wall Street and more about, well, a canal.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
All right, so the Panama Canal. Remember how we were talking about how it was hit so hard by that drought?
Oh, yeah, record drought, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So the good news is that shipping traffic is actually on the rise again.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, which is great because that canal is like a major artery for global trade.
For sure.
Yeah, it's so important.
I mean, if that canal isn't functioning properly, it's like a traffic jam for the entire world.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's even more interesting is that the Canal Authority, they're not just like sitting back and watching this recovery happen. They're actually considering like this major dam project.
Really?
Yeah, and they've even revamped their container ship booking system. They're really trying to be proactive.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. So you have to think those kinds of changes, they could really impact like shipping costs and how efficient everything is. I mean, this could have like a ripple effect globally.
Yeah.
It makes you realize just how connected everything is, right?
It really does. It's like, you know, one little thing happens over here, and then it has this huge impact on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so from a giant canal to some individual companies making news, let's talk about 23andMe, Mance. They're still struggling. I mean, they reported another quarterly loss.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And their stock, it had actually perked up a little bit earlier this week after they announced like some restructuring and job cuts. But then it dipped again after this latest news.
So it seems like investors are still a little bit wary.
Yeah. It's like a classic case of like those challenges that biotech companies face, especially those that are like really dependent on consumer spending. You know, when things get tight, people start cutting back on those, you know, like discretionary purchases like DNA testing kits.
Right, exactly. It's like the first thing to go when you're trying to save money.
Yeah. And, I mean, they did cut their workforce by 40% to streamline operations.
That's a lot.
Yeah. But it seems like investors still aren't totally convinced that that's going to be enough to get them back on track.
Well, the market is always looking ahead, right? So the question is, what will 23andMe do next? Like, how are they going to innovate? How are they going to adapt to how consumers are changing? It'll be really interesting to see what they do next.
Okay, now for a company that's on a completely different trajectory, let's talk about Shopify.
Okay.
They're feeling pretty good about things. They're predicting strong growth during the holiday shopping season, which is coming up soon.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Especially with everything that's been going on.
Yeah, exactly. And one of their execs even said that they're finding that sweet spot between investing in growth, but then also making sure that their operations are super efficient. It's like a delicate balance.
It is, yeah. But they seem to be doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, it seems like they have.
Yeah.
And it's such a stark contrast, right?
Yeah.
Like you've got one company really fighting to stay afloat, and then you've got another one that's riding this wave of e-commerce.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like two different worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of waves,
Yeah.
let's talk about General Motors and their big splash in the electric vehicle market.
Ah, yes, what was it? The baby Escalade.
Yes.
I love that.
Officially known as the Vistiq.
Vistiq. Okay.
Yeah. It's this really sleek all-electric addition to the Cadillac lineup. And it's the final model in a series of new EVs that they've rolled out for their luxury brands.
Yeah.
It's really clear that this is all part of GM's big push to be a major player in the EV market.
Definitely. I mean, you can see they're really serious about competing in this rapidly growing space.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the big question for them and for all automakers, honestly, is differentiation, right? Like, how do you make your EV stand out when there are so many options out there?
Especially in the luxury segment where brand identity and all those extra bells and whistles, they're so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you're not just buying a car, you're buying an image.
Exactly. Okay, so from electric vehicles to something a little bit more, I don't know, abstract.
Lead the way.
So SoftBank's CEO, Masayoshi Son, he's been making some headlines with these bold predictions about AI.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He believes that AI is going to reach a state of super wisdom.
Super wisdom. He actually said super wisdom.
That's what I read.
Wow, okay.
That's going to ultimately benefit all of humanity.
That's quite a statement.
Yeah, apparently he delivered this message while channeling some serious Steve Jobs vibes.
Okay. What, like the black turtleneck, the jeans?
Yeah, gunmetal gray jacket and a black turtleneck.
Oh, wow. He went all out. Well, I mean, it's certainly a very optimistic and thought-provoking statement. I mean, AI is already a game changer in so many sectors, from, finance to healthcare. But I think the question is, as this technology evolves so rapidly, what about the ethics of it all?
Right. How do we harness this incredible power in a way that's responsible? And I don't know, what does a world with super wise AI even look like?
It's exciting and kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah, a little unnerving. I mean, if we think about it from the perspective of the listener, how could these AI advancements affect their everyday life? Their work, their relationships, even their sense of what it means to be human.
Those are some big questions, and they're questions we're going to have to grapple with more and more in the years to come.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think before we get too lost in the future, let's bring it back to the present and look at how some key sectors are performing.
Sounds good. Where should we start?
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, we've been talking a lot about technology, so why don't we start there?
Okay.
As we've already seen, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride with volatility in both stocks and cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
And the Nasdaq's dip, I think, really reflects the pressure that that a lot of these tech companies are facing.
Right.
From increased regulation to intense competition, it's a really challenging landscape to navigate right now.
Yeah. But are there still bright spots?
Yeah.
Are there opportunities for growth within tech?
Absolutely. I mean, areas like AI, which we've been talking about,
Right.
and cloud computing, they continue to show strong growth potential.
Yeah.
So for investors, it's really about being selective, strategic. Not all tech is created equal.
Right.
Okay, now let's move on to energy.
Okay.
Things seem fairly stable there for the moment, but winter is coming.
Yeah.
And with it, the potential for, geopolitical tensions to kind of flare up, especially in Europe.
Right. And energy prices, they can be so volatile, especially as demand increases during the colder months.
Exactly. Plus, with the ongoing conflict, there's just a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, so much uncertainty. Definitely something to keep a close eye on.
Absolutely. Now, last but not least, let's talk about finance.
Go.
Interest rates are still top of mind.
Yeah.
And every move that the Federal Reserve makes is being watched so closely.
Right.
I mean, any change to interest rates, it can impact borrowing costs for businesses, for individuals, and that can ultimately influence the entire economy. It's a really tricky balancing act.
Yeah, it is. And then at the same time, you've got banks navigating this rapidly changing landscape with like the rise of digital transactions and all that fintech competition.
Right, exactly.
You're really having to like adapt quickly.
Yeah, they are. It's a fast-moving world.
So it seems like we've got tech companies like racing to innovate, to stay ahead.
Yeah.
We've got the energy sector like racing for potential winter woes.
Right.
And then the financial world's like walking this tightrope between interest rates and all these disruptive fintech companies. What a mix.
It is. It's a fascinating time to be watching the markets. And I think too we need to remember the global perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the US continues to attract capital, but emerging markets, they're showing real resilience and growth potential.
Oh, yeah, they are.
I mean, diversification is key for investors who are looking to navigate the complexities of the global market. There are opportunities everywhere, but you really have to be smart about it.
You really do.
Yeah.
It's like we've taken this whirlwind tour of the entire financial world today. It's so much information, so many moving pieces. I feel like my head is spinning a little bit.
Well, I think what really stands out to me, and maybe even feels a bit unsettling, is that whole notion of AI achieving super wisdom. Like, it's such a bold statement.
It's almost like something out of a science fiction movie.
It is, but it's becoming increasingly plausible. What if we actually take Sun at his word and really think about where this super wisdom, like where it could have the most profound impact in the near future?
Yeah, good question. Like, where could AI really make the biggest difference, do you think?
I don't know, but I think that's something worth thinking about.
It is.
Yeah.
It's pretty mind-blowing, really. And I think it all just starts by paying attention to these seemingly small shifts and stories that are happening all around us.
Yeah.
Because who knows what incredible breakthroughs might be just around the corner.
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this, right? It helps us connect the dots and see these bigger trends emerging.
Yeah, it does. All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But there's so much more to explore.
Definitely. Join us for part 2, where we'll delve even deeper into these fascinating trends.
Sounds good. We'll see you there.
Before we move on, I keep thinking about, that Panama Canal thing that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
And how it's recovering from that drought. It really makes you think about how connected, all these different systems are all over the world. Like,
it does. It's like sometimes it takes something like that to really remind us, like something happens over there and it impacts things over here.
Right. It really shows how, like, even something like a drought in Panama, it can lead to these shipping delays, and that can then mess up manufacturing and retail and even, like the prices that we see at the grocery store.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it really highlights how vulnerable, but then also like how resilient those global supply chains really are. It's kind of amazing when you think about it.
It really is. Like all these different systems working together to keep things moving.
Yeah. And it's really cool to see how the Panama Canal Authority is being so proactive. Like they're not just reacting to this drought. They're actually planning for the future with that damn project in the new booking system. Like they're thinking ahead.
Yeah. They're not just sitting around waiting for the next crisis to hit.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about market trends, we've talked about global trade, we even touched upon the like philosophical side of AI.
Right.
So what other like interesting stuff have you've dug up from our source material today? What else is out there?
Well, how about something that affects pretty much everyone? Holiday shopping.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean everyone loves a good holiday shopping spree. But what are the experts saying about this year? Is it going to be like a record-breaking season, or are people going to be a little bit more cautious? Like, what's the vibe?
It's kind of a mixed bag, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely like excitement and anticipation for the holidays, but there's also like this underlying uncertainty, I think, you know?
Yeah.
Consumer confidence is a little shaky and, inflation is still a concern for a lot of people.
Yeah. So maybe people will be a little bit more thoughtful about how they spend their money this year.
I think that's a possibility. We might see people like choosing more practical gifts or maybe, focusing on experiences rather than just buying a bunch of stuff. And I think retailers are definitely aware of this kind of shift in thinking, and a lot of them are already adjusting their strategies.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. They don't want to end up with a bunch of like extra inventory after the holidays are over.
Exactly.
So like what kind of strategies are we talking about? Like what are they doing differently?
Well, I mean, think about like hourly promotions and deeper discounts, and there's a really big emphasis on personalization this year too. And e-commerce is obviously still going to be huge, but I think we might actually see a bit of a resurgence in people wanting to shop in person this year, like that desire for the in-person experience.
Right, like going to the mall,
Yeah.
Black Friday, all of that.
Thanks, yeah.
Like it's like this dance between like shoppers and businesses, and they're both trying to figure out how to move in this ever-changing landscape. It's pretty fascinating.
It is. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how things play out over the next few months. We were talking about changing landscapes earlier, and I think that kind of brings us back to AI, right? We talked about all the amazing things that it could do, but what about like the potential downsides? Like what could go wrong?
Yeah, right? I mean, every superhero has their weakness.
Yeah.
Right? So what are some of the potential like risks of this super wise AI? Like what are people worried about?
Well, I think one of the biggest concerns is job displacement.
Yeah.
As AI gets more and more sophisticated, it's able to like automate a lot of tasks that used to be done by people. And so that could lead to, potentially significant job losses, especially in industries like manufacturing, transportation, even customer service.
Yeah, right. That's a lot of people's livelihoods that could be affected. I mean, automation has always been like this double-edged sword, right?
It has. And with AI, the pace and the scale of automation could be, unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's happening so fast.
It is. And
Yeah.
and another risk that people talk about a lot is algorithmic bias.
Right.
AI systems, they're trained on massive amounts of data, and if that data reflects existing societal biases, then the AI can actually like perpetuate those biases or even amplify them.
Yeah, so it's like garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. And this is a really big deal because it could have like huge implications in areas like hiring, lending, even the criminal justice system. It's really important that these AI systems are developed and used in a way that's fair and transparent and accountable.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
Like we're basically handing over the keys to the kingdom
Yeah.
to these incredibly powerful systems, and we need to make sure that they're programmed with the right values.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not just about the technology, it's about how we as a society choose to use it, how we govern it, and how we make sure that it ultimately like serves humanity. Like that's the big question.
Yeah. So we've got job displacement, algorithmic bias. Any other like AI anxieties that we should be aware of? Like, is there anything else that people are worried about?
Yeah. I mean, I think another concern is the potential for AI to be used for harmful purposes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, think about things like deepfakes or increasingly sophisticated like phishing scams or even autonomous weapon systems that could be like making life or death decisions without any human intervention.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about that. That's getting into some scary territory. Like it sounds like a sci-fi movie where the machines take over.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to get carried away, but the point is that AI, it's a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that its development is guided by, ethical principles and a genuine commitment to human well-being.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's not about being blindly optimistic, and it's not about being overly pessimistic. It's about like approaching this technology with a balanced perspective and being willing to have those tough conversations,
Exactly. I think that's really key.
Okay, so we've talked about the amazing possibilities of AI, and we've talked about the potential pitfalls. what else should we be paying attention to as we try to understand this crazy financial world and its impact on our everyday lives? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, let's bring it back to something a little closer to home, like personal finance.
Okay.
With all the market volatility and the economic uncertainty out there, I think it's more important than ever to have a solid financial foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so easy to get caught up in, the headlines and all the latest investing trends, but sometimes we forget about the basics of just managing our own money.
Right, like the fundamentals, like
Exactly.
budgeting and saving and investing wisely. These are essential, no matter what your income is or your financial goals. It's about building good habits.
Okay. So back to basics it is. What are like some of the key things that people should be focusing on? Like, where do we start?
Well, first and foremost, create a budget.
Okay.
Like actually track where your money is coming from and where it's going, so you can see your spending patterns and figure out where you can cut back and save more.
Yeah, it's like giving yourself a financial checkup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you have a budget in place, then you can start building an emergency fund.
Right.
Aim to have like 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses tucked away in an easily accessible account. That way, if something unexpected happens, like, you lose your job or there's a medical emergency or anything like that, you've got that cushion.
Yeah, I mean that peace of mind is so valuable, especially these days with so much uncertainty in the world.
It really is. And don't forget about investing.
Right.
Even small amounts invested regularly can really grow significantly over time. That's the magic of compound interest.
Oh yeah. Compound interest is pretty incredible. It's like a snowball effect. Like your money earns money and then that money earns more money.
Exactly. The key is to start early and be consistent.
Yeah.
Diversify your investments. Understand how much risk you're comfortable with, and don't be afraid to seek professional advice if you need it. There are resources out there to help you.
Yeah. So budget, save, invest, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, that sounds like a pretty solid plan for navigating these crazy financial waters that we're all in right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good starting point. And remember, personal finance, it's a journey, not a destination. It's about making informed decisions, being disciplined, and being able to adapt as things change.
And speaking of adaptation, I think it's time for us to adapt to the end of part 2 of this deep dive. I mean, we've covered so much already, but there's still more to explore.
Definitely. Join us for part 3, where we'll dig into some specific investment strategies, and we'll look at some global economic trends, and we'll even touch upon the psychology of money.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
It'll be fascinating.
Okay, we'll see you there. All right, welcome back to our final part of this deep dive. It feels like we've been on this whirlwind tour of the financial world. I mean, we've talked about everything from like the stock market swings to the potential of AI.
It really has been quite a journey, but we've still got some more ground to cover, a few more interesting threads to pull on before we wrap up.
Okay, I'm ready. Lead the way. What else have we got?
Well, let's dig into the world of investment strategies.
Yeah.
We've talked about why, investing is important, but with so many options out there, I mean, it can be so overwhelming.
Yeah, it really can.
Like, where do you even begin? It's like, trying to pick one flavor of ice cream when there's like a million choices.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like walking into this giant financial supermarket,
Yeah.
and there's just endless aisles of investment products, and you're just like,
Exactly. Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So, the first step is to really understand, your own financial goals and your risk tolerance. Like, what are you saving for?
Right.
Is it retirement? Is it a down payment on a house? Your kid's college fund? And how comfortable are you, with the idea of your investments going up and down? Some people, they're okay with a lot more risk, if it means a potential for higher returns.
Right.
Others, they prefer a more conservative approach. It really depends on your personality and your circumstances.
Yeah. Not all investments are created equal. It's like, some are considered safer, but maybe they offer slower growth. And then others are more volatile, but you could potentially have those like big gains.
Exactly. So it's about finding, what's right for you. So once you have a clear picture of your goals and your risk tolerance, you can start exploring different investment strategies. And one that's always recommended is diversification.
Right. Diversification. We hear that word a lot.
We do.
What does that really mean?
Yeah. It basically means spreading your investments across different asset classes.
Mm.
So, like stocks and bonds and real estate. It's like that old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
It helps to reduce your overall risk. Because if one investment performs poorly, the others might be performing well and kind of balance things out.
So you're not putting all your hopes and dreams on one single investment.
Exactly. It's all about managing that risk. So diversification is key. But there are other investment strategies out there too. Another popular one is value investing.
Value investing, okay.
Yeah. And this involves finding companies that are kind of undervalued by the market. So, companies that have solid fundamentals, but maybe they're flying under the radar a little bit. And the idea is to buy these companies at a discount and hold on to them for the long term.
So it's like finding those hidden gems in the stock market.
Exactly. The diamonds in the rough. And value investing, it requires a lot of patience and research.
Yeah, I bet.
But it can be a really rewarding strategy for those who are, willing to put in the time and the effort. And you mentioned ESG investing earlier.
Right.
That's another one that's been gaining a lot of attention recently.
Yeah, I've heard that term thrown around a lot. Can you remind us what that's all about?
Yeah. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's an investment approach that considers not only a company's financial performance, but also its impact on the environment, its social responsibility, and its corporate governance practices.
Okay. So it's like investing with a conscience.
Exactly. And it's become increasingly popular as investors, seek to align their portfolios with their personal values.
I love that. Like, you can do well financially, but you can also do good for the planet and society at the same time.
Right. And there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that, companies with strong ESG practices, they might actually outperform those that don't in the long term.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's a win-win situation.
It is.
Okay. So we've got diversification, value investing, ESG investing. Are there any other, key strategies that we should be thinking about?
I mean, there are tons of strategies out there, but I think, the most important thing is to find one that aligns with your own goals, your risk tolerance, and your overall investment philosophy. Don't be afraid to do your research, talk to a financial advisor, and remember that investing it's a long game. It's not about getting rich quick. It's about building wealth steadily over time.
That's great advice. All right, well, I wanted to kind of circle back to something we touched on earlier, which is the global economy and how everything is so interconnected. What are some of the major trends that we should be keeping an eye on? What's happening in the world that could affect things here?
Well, one major trend is the rise of emerging markets. So you've got countries like China and India and Brazil. They're experiencing really rapid economic growth, and they're becoming increasingly influential on the world stage. They're not just developing economies anymore. They're major forces shaping global trends.
It's like the global balance of power is shifting a little bit.
Exactly. And investors are definitely taking notice, and a lot of them are, looking for opportunities in these emerging markets. There's a lot of potential there. Now, on the flip side, there's this idea of deglobalization that's been gaining some traction.
Yeah, I've heard that term, but I'm not totally sure what it means.
Right. So deglobalization, it refers to this trend of countries becoming, more inward focused. So they're prioritizing domestic production and they're trying to reduce their reliance on, those global supply chains that we've been talking about. And this trend has been, kind of fueled by a lot of recent events like, the pandemic where supply chains were disrupted and also geopolitical tensions, which have, made countries kind of rethink their reliance on other nations.
So it's kind of like a step back from that interconnected world that we've become so used to.
Yeah, in some ways it is. And it remains to be seen how this trend will play out. But it's definitely something that investors and businesses need to be aware of because it could really impact things like, trade and manufacturing and even, the availability and cost of goods. It's a pretty significant shift.
Okay, so emerging markets are on the rise. Deglobalization is potentially changing things up. Is there anything else on your radar? What about the big picture, long-term stuff?
Well, one thing that can't be ignored is climate change. I mean, it's a major factor that will continue to shape the global economy for years to come. This transition to a low carbon future is going to require like massive investments in innovation, and it will create challenges, but it will also